Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zauser here with another episode of the Social Change Career Podcast. We're here in season 12, episode 14, a very nice number, talking about blending art, communication, and peace building for change with Maria Elisa Pinto Garcia. For people who have not joined us before, or if you have, just a reminder, we live stream the podcast to YouTube and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is our main channel. We really like to hear from people. So throughout the entire episode, please feel free to write a few bullet points about where you're from, a little bit about your background, and then particularly share your comments and questions, and we'll weave them throughout the podcast as much as possible. This is one of over 140 episodes of the podcast featuring brilliant innovators from all parts of the world, whether impact investors, foundation heads, human rights activists, technology people, engineering, reducing gender-based violence, humanitarian relief. So if you like the podcast, please consider rating and sharing it. And you can search through all the other episodes on PCN Global/listen or at any major podcasting platform. And then 3 quick requests. Again, share the podcast. Please follow Maria Elisa on LinkedIn. Check out the Sonder Collective, the Prolangar Foundation. Please follow PCDN. And I will summarize her bio. It's very impressive. She's a social entrepreneur, artist, and facilitator, has lived at the intersection of peace building, art, and communications. She's designed and delivered more than 20 creative projects in Colombia and beyond, including Memory Initiative, video projects, artivism, and has helped reach over 15,000 people. And a lot of those projects have been around culture, peace, and working on addressing structural and cultural violence. She's also done a lot of work in trauma healing, dialogue, community building, research, and directly impacted more than 1,000 people. She has a master's degree in global studies from Tokyo University of Foreign Studies on a full scholarship from JICA, the Japan International Cooperative Agency. So maybe she'll give you some tips on that fellowship. She has lots of teaching experience at Los Andes and other university and other places, and has 10 publications, including books and scholarly articles. She currently serves as the operations lead of Reimagine Peacebuilding, which is a wonderful project connected to the Sonder Collective. She's president of the board of directors of the Prolangar Foundation and also project lead of the documentary Indivisibles. She's also a singer and songwriter. So we were just talking about that, and hopefully she'll let us know some about her music. And she performs regularly in Bogota and other places and is a true artivist, activist, human rights person. And I'm joining from Medellin, Colombia. Maria Elisa is in Bogota. And thank you so much for joining us today. And just to start off with, if you think back to your younger years, whatever that means to you, not that you're old, I'm much older than you are, when you were thinking about the type of work or activities you might want to engage in professionally, have you always been an artist? Have you always been a peace builder? And how did you go from thinking about what you might want to do to actually making this a career?
Well, thanks, Greg, first to hold this conversation and to have me here. Yeah, actually, I thought I was going to be a singer and more like in the arts field. I played the violin when I was 4 years old, and the piano. Then I was in the choir of my school. Then I had a group, a pop group, when in my when I was 18, 19, my 20s. But when I was 17, that is the time when you apply for the university and everything. I actually applied to both fields. Let's say I applied to music and I applied to government and international relations, because anyway, because of my parents, I also have this social vocation and and vocation for service, but still the music was really strong. And in the end, what inclined the balance, you said, that like the made me take the decision for government
To tip the balance,
tip the balance, was an unfortunate fact, that is that Jaime Garzón, one of the most brilliant comedians in Colombia, was assassinated in 1999 when I was taking this decision. And at that time, I thought music might be a very selfish path for me. If I was born in this country with this terrible war, I might go to these hard issues of peace building and government, and music can be always a hobby. So that's how I saw it at that time, that they were like two different paths where no relation was there between the two of them. And later, fortunately, my path and my career showed me the opposite, that actually there are a lot of links between peace building and the arts. So yeah.
So my son is 13, just turned 13, and he is learning violin. I wouldn't say very happily. So in terms of your musical talent, what other instruments? So it's vocal, it's, what are the main instruments and what type of music? I mean, one of the things, Colombia is an amazing place. I've been living here for 6 years, coming for 20, and I think Colombia has some of the most vibrant art and comedy and theater and music for a country of about 50 million, and it's so regional and so powerful. So what is your typical, like, do you have a musical tradition, or what do you call the type of music? What instruments do you play, and stuff like that?
So I play the piano and the ukulele. I love the ukulele because of the ukulele, I think I started composing music. I don't know whether because it is such a, I don't know, intimate instrument, a small, like tiny one, and that I felt very comfortable in composing there. But later I also composed in piano, and I sing. That singing is for me like the best way I express my artist self. I love singing. Yeah.
And we're not jumping directly into careers. And for people who, maybe most people know Shakira, Juanes, Carlos Vives,
Yeah.
Keep Down. But for people who maybe don't know much about Colombian music, any favorite musicians? I mean, apart from checking out your music, you would say, if you want to explore 2 or 3 of the most interesting groups or singers in Colombia, I mean, there's so many, where would you recommend people to start?
Okay, so there's one that is from Medellin, actually, called Puerto Candelaria. I love the work they do. They actually have music for children and for adults, let's say. It's incredible the way the music they do. I also like a new artist, well, new, but she's been in the field like I think 5 years ago. Her name is Briela Ojeda. She comes from Nariño, which is in the southern part of the country. I love her music a lot. And maybe another one that is becoming more famous because she's like a real artivist in the as a musician. Her name is, or the way she called herself is La Muchacha Isabel. She's from Manizales, if I'm not wrong, and she also has amazing music that has also been like the kind of the soundtrack of our social movements recently. Yeah.
Can you remind? So Puerta Calendaria, I've actually seen them in concert, both in Medellin and Paris, and they're amazing. And have a good friend who is actually a dancer, was in their music video from their album Los Bichos Raros. So she was actually one of the dancers. And I put La Muchacha Isabel, and I can't remind me the second person who was from
Briela, which is, I don't know, it's not even a word in Spanish as far as I know. Briela with B.
Yeah.
Ojeda is her last name.
Okay, I'm sure I'm misspelling it wrong, but anyway. So going back to career stuff, so you did university. Are there any critical skill? So you applied for both music and kind of international relations. So what would you say in terms of your university experience for people in university or close to graduating? What was the most meaningful for you in terms of, obviously there's personal enrichment, there's learning, but actually in terms of skills, what are some of the skills you have found most beneficial, maybe you developed or advanced in university? And for people currently in university, what is your advice for people in terms of how to both have an amazing experience, but also get and develop skills that would make them more employable?
So, well, the university was the first place that I actually approached to the peace and conflict studies field. Let's say I learned a lot about, well, and conflict was in the highest point in Colombia at the time I studied from 2000 to 2006. So I learned a lot about economic and conflict transformation, conflict studies, conflicts around the world, Islamic. At that time, the Islamic thing was really, really strong in the field. Of course, international relations, But actually, in terms of other skills, I also appreciate a lot from my university and my major career the fact that I had to speak in public from the first semester. So one of the methodologies they use is that we as students had to present all the time one topic of the whole, I don't know, semester that we were going to study. And in that sense, since the very beginning, I got used to speak in public to my fellows and my colleagues, and that in the end, yeah, I felt that I never had that fear in my when I was working to speak in public, and I really appreciate that because it became normal for me because I had to do it since the beginning. And the other thing that I really appreciate about my university was that they also made us write a lot. So my writing skills also got better and better because I also had to do it a lot and a lot and a lot. Um, yeah. So and of course, yeah, as international relations, they also emphasized in languages. So English and French were also like major. Items to cover in the major, and that was also very important in my career.
I've done a lot of improvisational theater. I mean, I'm not a trained theater person, but love improv comedy. Performed in a group in college and have done playback. And I have some fear of public speaking, but I can speak in front of a group of 1,000 people, and I feel nervous, but like I do it. I struggle in other areas, but for the ability to communicate both in written and oral and visual forms is so important. And
Yes.
so any tips, because you've worked with lots of people, for people who might feel insecure or anxious about talking in front of groups, any advice that you've seen that's helped others or that you've kind of mentored others to deal with the challenge? Because some people say public speaking is like the worst fear they have,
Yeah.
like unimaginable. And just any tips on that?
Yeah. I used to do some training for the military, actually, to speak in front of a big audience, or also in front of the media. And what we said at that time was, uh, first, get some relaxation in your body. So for example, you can move your toes. Nobody will see that at all. I mean, nobody's going to check. And they had these big boots and everything. So, but yeah, do some movement and try to be aware of your body and relax, and put your shoulders down. That will give you, and breathe as much as you can. Breathe slowly. So that all that will help you to regulate your nervous system. But also some other tips is like you don't see to a specific person, but you look rather to the horizon somehow. And there's another one that I have never tried, but I have that I have heard a lot, is that you imagine people naked, and that will ease the pace.
Yeah, I've heard that one a lot. I've never tried that particular one. I don't know. I don't know if it would help or not. I mean, I think breathing centered, and also realize it's not about the speaker, whether like the idea is like it's not about you if you're the person speaking. It's like being of service and
Yeah.
trying to put ego somewhat aside, and also make it engaging, because a lot of, if you engage with the audience and get them talking, or at least engaging with each other. So I mean, but that is a real challenge. So where in the world along your journey did you go to Japan first, or Prolangar, or let's think post university? In terms of where did you work in media, journalism, and kind of the different steps that came along, whether it was Japan or the Prolangar Foundation?
So after I graduated, I started working in the beginning with private organizations, but then I worked in the presidential program for landmine action in Colombia. And that was really insightful. First, because it was working for the first time in the peace building field, and that felt really like, yes, this is my place. But also because there I started seeing the relations between peace building and the arts. So what I had to do was to facilitate some workshops on MRE, which is mind risk education. So basically, what we do is to talk with the conflict affected communities about new behaviors that they can do to avoid landmine accidents. And when I arrived with a PowerPoint presentation, really boring, really, like from the city. Of course, I was doing this in the rural areas of Colombia. The message didn't convey at all. Like it was absolutely pointless. While if I started, for example, using role playing or started using sing writing, so that they could spread the message to other community members, that was super powerful. And then I realized, yeah, there are. I mean, when I use alternative approaches and art-based approaches for this is really powerful to actually change behaviors and save lives for people that are affected by landmines. And then I got this. Okay, yes, this is something. And then I applied for the uh, Japanese university. It is the Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. They have a master's in global studies with emphasis in peace and conflict. And then the research proposal that I did for the scholarship um, was was to enhance and deepen my knowledge on that. What is the link between those fields? And actually, your article was one of the first ones that I wrote there at that time, but there was very few literature, I remember. But still, I felt like if I'm going to go all over the world, because it is far away from my country, to study something, it has to be something that I feel passionate about. And then, fortunately, I got accepted for the scholarship, and then I focused during 2 years on studying the links between art and peace building, and more specifically between music and reconciliation. Music that has been composed by victims and ex-combatants in Colombia. To what extent this music contributes or has some limitations in terms of reconciliation. And that was super, super interesting. And yeah, and my passion, definitely.
Amazing. So I did my dissertation, arts and peace building, in Bosnia, so a whole nother discussion.
Yes.
But just a couple of quick questions. I'm a huge fan of fellowships and scholarships, and they really changed my life in ways that would be unimaginable. And they also have mentored many people in fellowship, served as fellowship advisor. And what is your advice for, do you know why you were competitive for this particular application? And any advice for people who are starting to think about fellowships, whether for a formal graduate program, a certificate, or professional training? What helps make someone competitive, or where to find them?
Yes, so I'm also a big fan of fellowships. I have done quite a few in my life, and they have also added a lot of value to my career. Um, in that specific, no, in all the ones that I have applied, I think first it's really important that you feel really passionate about the thing that you are going to do there. I mean that, because if you feel about like that, you can convey that message in your application, and the people that will read it will definitely feel that that this is something that involves you, and that you're going to put all your energy in there. And this is how it is in, for example, in a master's degree or even a PhD. You're going to spend 2 years, 5 years of your life focused on that field. So it's something that needs to be, it is something that needs to be really important and deep for you. um, but I also, for example, at that time, I think it's really important to get other readers before you submit your application, other readers, other feedback, comments. There you will get a better application, because they would tell you, this is a very important message, you have to emphasize more on that, spend more time on this, you have spent a lot of time saying, I don't know, your background, put more emphasis on this. And that helps you a lot to navigate the applications and what people expect from you, to read from that application. And as long as you're honest about your passion, I think you will definitely be an unique candidate, because no one is going to have your background and your experience and what you're bringing to that experience. So be honest as well. The more honest you can be is the better. Yeah.
So that's wonderful advice. And I put in a few resources: PCDM, ProFellow, Open Society, DAD, Fulbright. I mean, there's a million places. And I would just add two things: that be prepared to be rejected. Like, I just applied for something, which is like a short-term, like, it wasn't a fellowship. It was like a meeting I really wanted to go to. I didn't get accepted, but it's like, but I applied. So at least, yeah. So if I worked with one student, and she came to my office once at Georgetown, like almost crying, because she's like, "You're mean," because her application was horrible. And I didn't say it was horrible. But I pushed her and said, and we probably went through 4 or 5 rounds. I mean, she did the work, I did edits, but 4 or 5 rounds of revisions, she got the fellowship. But it's like it's like anything. There's this moment of uncertainty and doubt, and so you need to put in the time and be prepared to be rejected multiple times. And if it doesn't mean there's no guarantee you'll get it, but a lot of people, they see a fellowship, they apply, they don't get it, they give up forever. I know people applied for 2 or 3 times the same fellowship, but really they are amazing. I'm going to the research. I'm looking at how music played a role, in Colombia. Can you talk a little bit more? What did you find? Because obviously music or any art form can be used for extreme nationalist purposes or exclusionary purposes. And, our country or our nation or our group is right. And music can reinforce and create huge divisions. It can, so what did you find in terms of, was it, how did you go about the research, and what did you find, like, strong correlation or causation, or just the most amazing people, and any lessons you have for others working at this intersection of art and change?
So, well, lot to say there. The first thing is that when I approached and started reading about it, I faced this literature and kind of how do you say that? Anyway, there was this idea of the art can save the world if we all hold together in hands and use the power of art. Everything will change. If you give a violin to a small children or a small child, he would never be a combatant or whatever. Like this kind of narrative that I was like, I don't know if that is the way I want my thesis and my research to go to that path. I didn't resonate with that, because I was convinced, because I have been a musician myself, of the power of music and art, but at the same time, I was aware of, there are some limitations also for these tools. So that was one of the main interests that I have. And well, I also learned before I was going to Japan that in Colombia, music has been like the one of the natural ways of victims to release and have some cathartic experience of what happened to them. So, for example, in El Salado massacre, which is one of the most horrible massacres in Colombia, there were like more than 50 songs that victims wrote and composed, because it was like the natural way to tell their story and to elaborate what happened to them. In the Bojayá massacre, which is another one, there's more than 100 songs that have been written. So that also caught my attention, and I was thinking, like, okay, we have this. To what extent this reality can entail some opportunities or entail some limitations in terms of reconciliation. And I chose reconciliation because in the framework of peace building, reconciliation has a lot to do with psychosocial transformation, trauma healing, memory. And there I also saw the potential of these songs. But at the same time, I also learned when I was researching that there were also songs composed by ex-combatants from the paramilitary groups and the guerrillas. And then I thought, okay, let's also analyze that. and to what extent they contribute or not to reconciliation. And what I did was a very interesting experiment, and was to play a song of an ex-combatant to a group of victims, and to play a song from victims to a group of ex-combatants, and see the reactions there. And what I basically found is that so music can be, and these songs can be, a very important tool in terms of reconciliation for trauma healing, cathartic experiences, memory as a memory source, which is more appealing to an audience that will not have the same relation reading the same kind of piece in a newspaper, or actually listening to a song and the rhythms and everything. It also causes some sort of sympathy and empathy in the listeners, creates some understanding also from the listeners. But at the same time, I also found out that there were some victims, for example, that were very skeptical about the message that they were listening from the ex-combatant, for example. There were also some lyrics from the victims that were very, how do you say, the words they used and the message that they conveyed, it was more like an attack than a way to look for a link, which is not bad, but in terms of reconciliation is not the best way to attain that aim. And then I also found that some of the songs from the combatants were used by the government as a propaganda. So there's also, so in the end, I saw opportunities and limitations, and it was the very first approach that I had about art as a tool to transform cultural violence, which I think is the most the higher potential of art is to transform cultural violence, which is related to the beliefs, narratives, discourses, emotions that we have as a society in war, and how this needs to change so that we can attain peace. Yeah, I hope I was clear.
No, it was amazing, and I put in a few resources, other organizations using art and music for change. So Masterpiece, I used to be on their board. Search for Common Ground, in 35 countries, doing a lot with media, film, and in Burundi, I think I have this right. They took people from musicians. I've done this in multiple countries from different backgrounds, and created this whole festival of heroes, where they would celebrate people who save people from other sides, and also like try to bring musicians. Angola, the idea is that often, whether it's community-based musicians hanging out, in Colombia, there's like music everywhere, sometimes too much. There's sometimes you'll sit in a place and 3 cafes all have competing music, but it's there's a lot of music. But the idea of whether it's community-based, faith-based, or at the national level, artists often carry a high degree of trust and influence, and so sometimes they can really use that in ways, I wouldn't say essentialize or operationalize, but to really help facilitate positive impact. And I'll just tell one story, then we'll move on. So in Bosnia, one of my favorite examples, art was used a lot to resist war, and also post-war to try to build stronger connections. And obviously, I was in Serbia, Yugoslavia during the war. I mean, not in the fighting regions, and the propaganda, particularly the Milosevic regime was using, was just mind-blowing. And so much of it was taking leading filmmakers and what they call turbo folk, which is like kind of to basically demonize others, that they were, whether it was Bosniak Muslims or Kosovar. So, but one story is they had the Sarajevo Theater and Film Festival. First one, I think, was in '93, when there was thousands of shells hitting Sarajevo every week. Susan Sontag, all these people were there. And this story I didn't hear firsthand. It was from a documentary that I saw in Sarajevo. So the director of the film festival and theater festival, Mirsad Puritva, a journalist, asked them, how can you have a film festival and theater festival in the middle of a war? And his response is, how can they have a war in the middle of our film festival? The idea is like that, that obviously it's not going to stop the war, but there's something, and war should not happen, but there's something both in peace that arts can play this huge role, but also when there's extreme conditions, often artists, I mean, they could be exacerbating it from the state perspective or insurgent actors, but often they're these bridge builders. And the one other story, I got to visit the Pavarotti Music Center, part of War Child in Mostar, and it was interesting. I was talking to someone from theater, not music, and he had this very interesting story that when the war happened, the politicians stopped cooperating usually first. The politicians first. The criminals never stop collaborating because they can make money across the thing. But he's like, artists were always there, like both during the war. And so it's just like artists often are a vanguard, or I don't like that word, but that are often at the forefront of trying to build relations and humanizing. So can you talk a little about, so you, and I should say we met in 2014 in Turkey. I forgot the conference. And I don't even remember what the focus of the conference was. We talked a lot about art and peace building. There's people from all over the world. But can you talk in terms of Prolangar Foundation? So how did you go about helping to start that? And you basically were running, with a team, this foundation for over a decade, and always doing lots of other things. So what are your reflections on building and sustaining a nonprofit at the national level, and the wonders and the challenges, and just kind of and kind of some things you're most proud of in terms of the organization and its work?
Wow, that's a lot. Okay, so after I came from Japan, I wanted to do something about art and peace building, and fortunately it was 2012, so it was the year that President Santos started the peace agreement. So fortunately in the country there was this very good ambience towards peace after Uribe, which was quite the opposite. And but I didn't feel like I wanted to have like my own organization until 2014, that I had a very difficult job in the government, actually in the Cundinamarca State Office. So I'm grateful for that experience, because it was so hard that actually made me jump into the risk of having an organization. And at the same time, that organization, Prolangar Foundation, comes from my family. My family founded in 1988, but it was focused on elderly, on the elderly and the social work with elderly. And well, for a long time they didn't have money, and my mother, who was the director, she got her pension. She got retired, so she was going to close. And I told her, like, why don't I change the object and change the focus towards peace building, which is what I know how to do. And fortunately, well, that's what we did. And we also there was an entrepreneurship contest at that time, called Ventures, which had a category on culture and education. So I thought, okay, in that category I might work on this new business model of this organization. And the model of the contest is very nice, because you have mentors. So you go and you are getting feedback on your business model. So it doesn't matter actually if you win or not win. You are actually getting a lot from the mentors that you have. Fortunately, I did one. So I had a seed capital there. And that's how the new Prolangar Foundation started in 2013. So the job that we did, I think, was incredible. As you said in the beginning, we had a national report on memory focused on landmine victims, where we work with body awareness and other alternative means to convey and to convey and to do memory. Which was also very careful and with the no harm approach, really into our minds, and the work we did. It was amazing in the whole country. We also had like 3 museums, mobile museums, about memory, reconciliation, dialogue between enemies or opposing parties within the framework of the war. So we had in one project victims as combatants from the guerrilla, and also ex-combatants from the military and the police. We in these museums we also did a lot of advocacy and also raised awareness in the society that, as you know, in Colombia might be very indifferent to the war issues and the conflict affected communities. So I think art is really, really a powerful tool to convey message and get to the hearts of people so that they can actually feel and empathize with the, not only with the pain, but also with the resistance and the strength that we have as a country. So yeah, in general, I think we actually and I think we have contributed in Colombia uh, to the fact that art is more and more playing a very important role in peace building. In the beginning was like this, I don't know, the hippie thing where nobody would say that it's important to invest money, but now I think we have more in the narrative that investing in these kind of projects for trauma healing, for memory, for psychosocial projects is really important, and art is a very powerful tool in a country which is already, as you said, very artistic, very symbolic, very I mean, it's one of our strengths. So why don't we use that to heal ourselves as well? Now, in terms of an NGO in Colombia, it is, and it continues to be a very hard work. In terms of sustainability, in terms of the system, the peace building system, in Colombia and all over the world has these problems of I think it has a colonial approach still. I mean, they tell you it has a top-down approach. So basically, they tell you what to do, how to measure. You cannot, you don't have much margin to be independent, or to even have margin to do some savings for your administrative costs. So, and the grant field, I think, is really like a roller coaster. So you have this very good times sometimes that you get the grant and you do amazing projects, but there are some others that, as in the fellowships we were saying, you get rejected. I got rejected in 1 year 30 times. 30 times we applied for projects and 30 times we got rejected. So yeah, it is very hard still. And that's why I also got tired after 8 years and a half. I felt really, really tired. And I also decided to step a little bit to the side regarding Prolangar Foundation. I'm still the president of the board of directors, but I needed to do something else and maybe to see also what was happening in the world. And that's how I joined Reimagine Peacebuilding, which actually aims to change the peace building system that I suffered that much. So it makes a lot of sense, and I have learned a lot, and I have also got in touch with people around the world that also have lived what I have lived, and that are trying to change the international development system. Yeah.
So two questions. Thank you so much. And please check out Prolangar Foundation, Sonder Collective. One is thinking about your leadership role in terms of just hiring. Just any insights. One, where you don't have to share, but when you had an opening, whether it's finance or operations or field-based, would you get 20 applications or 500? And just any advice as someone who's hired regularly for people applying for jobs.
I would say first, again, be honest, because you can definitely see in a CV or a letter that you used to apply, if a person is actually honest or not about how they envision themselves to be in our organization. Also get to know the organization, because I mean, I don't want people to be an expert of what I do, but I do appreciate when people actually take the time to get to know more the work that we do, and to see themselves how they can fit and how can they can add value to what we do. So I think that's also really important, and I always appreciated when I saw that. I also appreciate a lot social, like mean soft skills. I don't like the soft word, but the social emotional skills, when I can see them, or when I see people that are eager to learn more about it. In an organization as Prolongar, which works with victims, trauma, very, very human and deep issues, we need also a team that is sensitive enough and that work in themselves in those issues so that we can serve the better. So for me, that was also, that was even more important, even rather than the, of course, the experience or the university and the studies were important, but when I saw that kind of sensitivity, that was also appealing to me. um yeah, I think I
Okay.
would say that.
Okay.
Hmm.
And then I've been in the peace building world. I'm more outside it now than in it. I'm more in the social entrepreneurship world. But I remember my first trip to Colombia in 2001. Catalina, who was my wife now, I mean, my girlfriend now wife, she
Hmm.
took me to, and I spoke no Spanish. She took me to a meeting of the Paz, the National Network of Initiatives for Peace and Against War. It was like a regional meeting. And I remember thinking back then, like, Colombian peace builders, and this is true in many places I've been,
Hmm.
have, I don't want to essentialize or make it grandiose, but have such incredible experience,
Hmm.
and not just peace builders, activists, human rights, labor organizers, indigenous, in terms of dealing with really huge structural and cultural challenges. And their skills and abilities are amazing. And that often let's say their bureaucratic skills in some areas, like the donor dance, could be
Yeah.
lacking. But there was this, and there still is to some degree, I think it is changing, this emphasis of, we are looking for the models and the frameworks and the theories and the trainings were coming often from the US or Europe,
Hmm.
and often, and some just, so just the, but the fun and the funding, but the most amazing practice often comes place from the regions that are faced with the greatest difficulties. And what outsiders can often do is funding, technical support, advocacy, influence their own government. So I'm just curious,
Hmm.
since you've been in the peace building field for, I mean, you're still young, but for a while, a substantial amount of time, do you see both the funding and power switching, or more the discourse is switching, but the power and funding isn't?
I am seeing a change in both, I think, although the most traditional funders keep doing, I perceive from what I heard in Colombia now, the same. But there are some funders, and even in USA, I know that there is some interest of doing things differently. Um, but yeah, I don't, maybe what I see, still is my perception, I'm not an expert, but what I feel is that from the philanthropy field, they are doing more experiments, let's say, or they are daring to release a little bit the control and trust more their partners. They actually call ourselves partners, and no, I don't know, beneficiaries, or which already entails, no, like a difference. um but yeah, what I think all of us are realizing in the world now, especially with what is happening, is that the peace building field and the needs to change. There's a radical change that needs to be in place. The Gaza genocide, and I mean, it's also obvious that we really need to change the way we are doing things. um, so I think that's kind of a strong and getting stronger. And there are movements like Shift the Power, for example, that happened in Colombia in December. We were like more than 700 people from all over the world actually doing things to shift the power and to have a different relation to the donors. And there were donors there, which was really, really important. And there were very honest conversations about what you're doing in this way is not what we need. What you are saying is this is top down. We actually know, really, because we live in the field and we know the needs that people have here. We actually know better than you guys what people need. Please give us the space. Please give us the funding. And that's really, that gives me hope, because although it's so slowly, I think the movement will continue and doesn't have any stop now.
Yeah, I mean, I think as someone who grew up in the US but lived in many places and worked in many, I think I was inculcated some with the belief that not the US is better, but we had very strong institutions and we could share a lot with the world. I think it was naive. And then once I started, and I think my first few years overseas, really in the early 90s when the Berlin Wall came down, I think I had some of that belief, but I'm so jaded and that I wish everybody had humility and nobody has the answers. And that, you know, if we would take people from Colombia and put them in the US and people from the US, put them in Northern, like the idea is like we all have strengths and weaknesses, and some places have more military might and economic might, but nobody has all the answers. And this idea of just exporting, the US is such a mess. And, you know, of course, there's still a lot of beautiful things, but it's like we need help from the world. And the US, certain parts of the US have a hard time acknowledging that because of this, let's say, messianic sense of like where the country has this like extra special mission. And part of it is nationalism. Like we're not that exceptional. Right. And if we had a little more humility, which a lot of people do. So going back to thinking about peace building careers or just arts and change in general, I mean, the average age of people who tend to engage with PCN is 32, but we've got people in their 50s, 60s, but a lot of people already have somewhat of a career. What is your advice for people, let's say, entering or trying to enter, let's say, change making? You've talked to like what skills, because the world of work is changing so fast. So what skills do you encourage people to think about developing or strengthening to potentially stay more hireable and obviously have a bigger impact, or at least a reasonable impact? So is it, I mean, I've been trained in facilitation, mediation. Is it become skilled at AI? Like we just finished our course, we teach on that. Or like where would you, and obviously it's all sector and person and geographic specific, but any general thoughts, since also in the Reimagine Peacebuilding, you're getting a very global perspective.
I actually wrote here a sentence that I want to read. No, I don't see it. But so what I have discovered is that inner and systemic change are totally interrelated. One can't happen without the other. And if we don't consciously choose what system do we want to live in, we will end up reproducing the same system that we have lived. So Reimagine Peacebuilding have given me this broad view of how change looks. And what I actually do think is that it looks like systemic change. Most of the time we think about specific people or specific power dynamics, but in the end, I think the systemic view allow us to see the bigger picture and how those systems have such a big impact in the way we relate to each other, in the way we relate to ourselves, that if we aim to change that within us and with the system, for me, that's real change. So now I think it's really important to get to know decolonial approaches, feminism approaches, relationship systems. Basically, there are many institutions now in the world, or organizations and movements, looking at oppressive systems and how can we change these oppressive systems. Again, not only in the system, but also in ourselves. We have internalized that much those systems that it entails a lot of inner work, but at the same time, to get to know more what is happening in the world around that. And especially if you come from the global south, that's super important to actually seeing yourself, oh my God, yeah, I have so much internalized that system, and how can I change that? How can I learn more from indigenous communities, our own practices? And then also with that in mind, start to reimagining new systems and entail some new realities very deep in the challenges of the real world as well. So that's how I'm seeing the change, basically really related to systems change. And that entails a lot of inner work, which is not easy at all, but it's really important.
Yeah, so we have about 5 more minutes. I'm going to ask a deep follow-up question, then we'll move on to a couple of simple things. So you talked about that you worked within government and found that frustrating. And you've worked in the nonprofit sector, you've worked, yeah. And so just one thing, when you think about, or when I think about systems change, there's all different ways to engage. So some people are in the system, whatever that means, whether it's government or industry, and they're trying to shape it from within. And it could be a higher education institution. And the idea is maybe they could affect, or obviously not them, but a group of people could coalesce and create a new policy, a new system, or a new change, or at least partial change. There's other people who are like, no, this system's not working, but we need to hold it accountable. So they're trying to influence either the system or the policies. And there's other people who just like want to drop out. And so any advice for people who are interested in change making, how do they locate themselves? Whether, I mean, again, it can change over a lifetime, but like, is it better? Because some of my alum went to work for big, horrible oil companies. Like, I don't think I ever would, but it's like, if they're in a big, horrible oil company and they're trying to make less environmental damage, or give away more money, is that better? Or is it better to be outside? So just like any thought on that balance. And of course there's no answer, but just if someone came to you and said, I don't know where to start in the system, holding the system accountable, or just something completely different, how to kind of orientate oneself.
Yeah. As long as you are aware of what you want to do, basically. I mean, because you can be in the old company doing what the old companies do, whatever. But at least if you're aware of what you want to change, and that you are in a system already, or that what relation in relation to, what is your relation with the system that surrounds you and that you want to change. I think that's really important, and that already it's as I said, it's a deep exercise, because I mean the old company is quite obvious, but for example patriarchal systems, or for example colonial systems, or white supremacy systems, they are so embedded in Colombia. Classism, they are so embedded in us that we don't even know there is a problem, and we don't see there's a problem there. So being aware about it, it's like a very first step. And a second step is like take decisions on where can you do more impact, and that I think depends in any person, and I respect the path that you choose. But as long as we are all doing some sort of efforts to change that, and being aware of the systems and the oppressive systems that basically are not working, climate crisis is also another example of this is not working. I think we are all contributing, and that's already an important fact. Yeah.
I mean, for people who don't know, Colombia will be hosting the COP16 biodiversity talks in Cali in the fall. But Colombia is, it's the second most biodiverse country in the world, and has a lot of amazing things. Like we just like 6 months ago, we went to the Rainbow River and that whole region. It's one of the best examples of sustainable tourism I've ever seen. And we stayed in this eco lodge, totally sustainable, and they limit the amount of people who can go in. Other parts of Colombia just filled with plastic garbage and cheap tourism. Yeah. But Colombia, we were talking earlier this week, or leaving messages. Bogota right now has a water shortage, and rationing of water is happening. And 2 or 3 months ago, there was horrible fires. And, so this climate change thing is becoming, I mean, this is one of the world's greatest challenges, and we're not doing a good job. And, so we can talk about this forever. So 3 quick questions, do one at a time. Doesn't have to have anything to do with work, but any book or TV series or movie that just has been occupying your brain in a good way, that maybe, has got you thinking. It could just be pure fiction, but anything that you might recommend others check out.
I'm actually doing a course I started last Tuesday on trauma-informed collaboration, and I'm very into the trauma field now, and I'm reading a book that is called The Body Keeps the Score. The name of the guy actually is really difficult to memorize.
I'll put it here.
The Body Keeps the Score. Bone something. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's also, it raises awareness about the role, the body as the main source, and where the trauma can is there, but also is the way that we can heal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really,
Amazing.
really.
And is this an organization, like, is it a training that's regularly offered, or it's like a pilot? Like, if other people wanted to find out
They
about this?
actually, yeah, the training is done in regularly basis. The organization is greater than, that's the name of the organization, the name.
Okay.
Trauma Informed Collaboration is the name
Okay.
of the training. And yeah, the first session was really, really
Okay. Great.
appealing.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the resources. I mean, I did a think piece on trauma and peace building a million years ago. I mean, it's not very good, but called Trauma Sensitive Peace Building. But also, Eastern Mennonite University post 9/11 started a program called the STAR program, Strategy for Trauma Awareness and Resiliency. I've talked to some people from the program. I know a lot have been in it, and the idea is that, yes, mental health professionals can play an important role, but there's not enough. And many cultures do it differently. And it's a really good program they've done around the world, culturally sensitive, to help basically build community resilient, kind of trauma sensitive practitioners. So it's something that people, and there's a lot of programs, there's a lot of bad ones too, but there's a lot of good ones. And I grew up in a family of mental health professionals. So I've done therapy on and off. I'm doing EMDR therapy right now. I mean, I'm not doing it, I'm having it done with me. There's a lot of interesting things that connect to body and spirit. So people might check that out. Second question, you just kind of answered part of the second question, but anything else you're currently working on upskilling or learning, or you hope to when, maybe when this course is done, just things that you want to keep building skills in?
No, basically the trauma field has, I don't know, grown so much in the last 3 or 4 years. I think during the pandemic, or so there is the polyvagal theory, there is the what you're doing, there is also the psychedelics and the relation with trauma healing. So for me, that's like my field. And well, it also relates to something that and I'm going to become a mother through adoption. And of course, for my child, that is also going to be very important. So that's why I'm so into the trauma field. And again, because it's not that the traumatized people and me. No, it's because I am working on my trauma as well, and I think it has improved a lot my relation with myself, but also with the people that I love. So it's been very interesting for me.
Last two questions. Isabel, who's a longtime friend, just saying thank you so much. She's based in Bogota. Last two questions for people who are interested in what you're doing, or Sonder or Prolangar. What's the best channel to follow you personally? Is it LinkedIn? Do you have a newsletter?
No, I don't have a newsletter, but I do have my Instagram. Is actually very active because I'm also a musician, as I said. So there you can see my music identity, but also my peace building identity. And LinkedIn, I also try to be quite active in LinkedIn, on LinkedIn.
And then just last question, how can people help you? So, can they listen to your music? Are you looking for partners or just interesting ideas? Obviously you're busy, but what kind of, is it just follow you on the channels?
No, so actually my problem now is that I don't have my music in the platforms. So that's why I'm going to launch a kick, like it's not on Kickstarter, but it's a crowdfunding campaign in Baki in April 25th, where you can contribute and donate if you want to support my music. And I will record a live music session so that I will have 5 songs on YouTube, on Spotify, and on Instagram, so that people can share and listen to my music. So please go to the Baki and support if you want.
Send me the link, whether it's now, and we'll add it to the show notes. So thank you so much for your time and energy, and all you and your family do to serve others and also learn, and the questions, and just, Colombia has so many amazing people, and I consider you, not just Colombian, like human being. And thank you, everyone. We had about 25, 30 people watching. So thank you for joining us. Again, this will be out as a podcast. Final reminder, please follow Maria Elisa, Sonder Collective, Prolangar Foundation, Peacebuilding, and consider rating and sharing the podcast. And then you heard it here first. I think Maria Elisa's told other people, but somewhat publicly, this is not YouTube, but I mean, it is on YouTube, but that her launch of her crowdfunding campaign. And last question, the collection of songs, is there going to be a thematic? Is it like a collection of individually named songs, or there'll be like a name for the group, like the product?
No, it's individual songs. For now, is not. No, we'll see.
And
Next step is it's an album.
and if
Hopefully.
anybody wants to invite you to play music, do you have an agent or just contact you?
No, contact me for now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful afternoon. Oops, I'm hitting end. Just give me one sec. Okay.